All right, welcome to the glass ceiling. Now, you know, every Wednesday, every 2 weeks in a month, we talk about women-related issues. We talk about, issues that affect women in different ways. But today, we're just, taking a different turn. We're bringing back a conversation that we had some time ago, and we want to talk about it because it does affect all of us, and each and every one of us must understand the power and the importance of negotiations, or rather mediation, I beg your pardon. And my guest is back here because she had a great time the last time she was here. And so we have her back here to talk mediation. Let me give you some background on my guest, and then of course we'll go straight into the conversation. We're talking mediation today, and for those of you who've been listening to conversations we've had here on Hard Facts, you know that we've talked about divorce, we've talked about business disagreements, we've talked about all kinds of things that most times don't need to be settled in court, and that's where mediation comes in. My guest is Franca Ciambella. She is the principal mediator of Raffles Mediation Chambers Limited, and she has been acting as a mediator for over 20 years. She was trained originally in Canada, and then with the Singapore Mediation Center and with the ADR Group in London, United Kingdom. She is on the panel of mediators at the United Nations WIPO, as well as the Nigeria Copyright Commission. Franca is a Canadian and a Nigerian wife based in Lagos. I like how you put that in your...
Thank you, Marianne.
It's so good to have you back here, Franca.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be back.
I know.
I've missed a show.
I can tell. So for the benefit of those who were not here the last time, who didn't listen, who were not able to tune in, let's start with the basics. What is mediation, and why is it important that we have this conversation?
Of course. So mediation is actually a process, and it's a process by which, two or more disputing parties decide voluntarily to come together and try to resolve their dispute amicably amongst themselves with the aid of a professionally trained neutral mediator. So basically, the mediator will act as a conduit, will guide and manage the process of mediation to help them come to a resolution themselves. And to address the second part of your question, why mediation? Well, for many reasons. When there is a resolution, the settlement agreement actually is like a contract, and it's enforceable. It has the force of law. But the beauty is that you can speak freely in a mediation because it's confidential and on a without prejudice basis. So the process is very good. Another reason is that we all know that litigation is costly, it takes a lot of time, and parties don't come away very satisfied. Mediation addresses that. Mediation is a very speedy process. In fact, with some pre-mediation sessions, most of the times the mediation day is one day, and we're able to bring the parties together and resolve the issue in a matter of a day. So it saves you a lot of time. Obviously saves you a lot of money because you're not going through the whole court process, and which can be long and protracted, and where the fees can amount to quite a bit. The other good thing is that it allows the parties to air out their grievances. Because the process is very flexible, the parties can say a lot of things and, air out their grievances, whereas if you're in court, you really have to stick to just the legal issues, and you may come away with feeling that you haven't said as much as you could. And then finally, because it's the parties coming together and resolving the issues themselves, the agreement is amicable, and in many cases they can continue the relationship. So the relationship is not broken.
So at least there's something left there.
That's right.
I have too many questions. I want to start by talking about, the fact that, mediation can occur at any time, during a dispute, and at the beginning or even during litigation. But can the lawyer be a mediator? How about if he or she is not necessarily my lawyer in the litigation, but acts for me in other matters. Many ask this question: who can be the mediator? Can
Right.
I, the OAP, be the mediator?
Okay, well, a few things here. The mediator should be a professionally trained person. Doesn't necessarily have to be a lawyer. Some of the best mediators are actually in construction or they're engineers.
Really?
But yeah, absolutely. But you should have mediation training. Of some sort, and so that's the first thing. Getting back to whether a lawyer or your lawyer can be a mediator, the mediator should be a neutral person.
Okay.
And so, if someone has acted for you in the past, even if they're not acting for you in this litigation, the question has to be: is that person conflicted? And both parties are going to be appointing the mediator, so both parties have to be comfortable that the mediator is actually a neutral third party. So whilst you may want your lawyer who acted for you in a different matter to be the mediator, the other side may not agree and may say, well, they know you and they're biased.
They
or
might
for
be
whatever.
biased, yeah.
Yeah. And if that's the case, then the mediation won't work. So it really should be a neutral third party who's not conflicted.
So most importantly, neutral third party who has no interest, no biases. So it doesn't have to be your lawyer. Lovely.
Correct.
Now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about, how my company, my family, or my business can prepare for mediation.
Right. Firstly, there has to be a willingness to mediate. Both parties have to voluntarily mediate, and there has to be a willingness to want to resolve this amicably. So that's the first step. So it's, really deciding, do we want to give this a go? And that's the first step. And then secondly, in preparing, it's selecting a mediator and maybe talking with your lawyers about who could be a good mediator or looking online to see who's available. So the selection of a mediator is very important. And as we said earlier, it should be a neutral third party who's not conflicted. And then you have to feel comfortable with the mediator. And one of the things I do is always an introductory session that doesn't cost anything, where I meet each of the parties separately and, make sure that they feel comfortable with me, that they're able to feel that they're in a safe space and that, there's trust that I, as a mediator, will be there to guide them and help them out. So the selection of the mediator. And then it's submitting all of the background information to the mediator and talking it over with the mediator. What do you really want out of this? And then it's, thinking of what could be some of the possible solutions. So that's some of the homework that you can do, yourself. But a lot of it will depend on the guidance of the mediator.
Yeah, so the mediator actually decides a lot of things. But let me go back to the very first part where I just want to know, do you have a problem half the time when you introduce yourself to a person and say, oh, I'm going to be your, mediator. I'm going to try as much as possible to make sure that everyone's interest is represented properly. But have you had people push back and say, no, I don't trust you.
Right.
I don't feel comfortable.
Right.
Do you find it difficult trying to convince people in certain circumstances?
Right, of course. Let me get back to something we said earlier. The mediator doesn't decide a case. The mediator guides the parties so that they make the resolution. The mediator doesn't have any decision-making power, unlike an arbitrator or a judge. With that background, now getting to your question of having people feel comfortable with you. I think, what is key is being a good listener, to listening to what the parties are telling you and to really try to find out what their interests and concerns are. Sometimes they'll tell you a big, long story and they think it's a breach of contract, whereas it was really something else. Was the issue, and that will come out in a mediation. And when I do the pre-mediation sessions, which I do with all the parties separately and privately, if I feel there is a concern, I will maybe say, look, let's take a time out, think it over and maybe come back in a few weeks and see if you still want to do the mediation. If I feel the parties are very emotional, to the point where they won't be able to sit in the same room and try to work out a settlement, I'll also say that. I'll say, maybe take some time out and think through the whole thing. And come back at a different time. So I think the pre-mediation sessions are crucial in finding out whether the parties are really comfortable and whether they're going to be able to at least attempt the mediation.
So you're telling me that even as a mediator, there's a lot of work that you need to put in, because you have to be very sensitive enough to understand that they could be coming to you for one thing, but then it's not really that thing. You find out something else in the course of having conversations with them. That's what you're saying.
Yes, absolutely. And that's also the beauty of mediation, because when you go to court, the judge is really at the mercy of what you submit.
Whatever you present, yes.
What the court papers say, and that's all the judge knows. But in a mediation, you have the ability to, air things out, to talk about other grievances, other hurts, and even in and especially in a business context, it's about relationships too. And so things will come out, and that is the beauty of mediation, that you have the opportunity to do that.
In your stay in Nigeria, before we go back to other serious questions, so far that you've been here in Nigeria, how open are people in these parts to mediation?
I think that we still have a ways to go to, let the public know what mediation is, to talk about mediation. And that's been one of the biggest, if I can call it an obstacle, is that, people they've heard of mediation, but they really don't know the process. And they don't know how helpful it can be. But we do know that litigation takes a long time, and that, it can be very expensive. So once they hear about the process of mediation and some of the benefits, then they become very, very open to it. So I think part of it is talking about mediation, getting the word out there, letting it be known, and also the mediators in town who are qualified to come forward and say, I can do mediation too.
We know that mediation is very voluntary. It's a process that's purely voluntary. But can a judge force, the process on a group of people and say, look, this is not a case that needs to be litigated. Go and sort yourselves out. I mandate a mediator. Can that be done? And does it work at the end of the day?
Sure. Well, here in Nigeria, there is a court mediation, and in certain litigations, there is a mandatory mediation. So that already exists. But even when there isn't, there's been case law recently, especially in the UK, where judges are able to mandate a mediation. And it's getting to there. Now, you sort of think, well, there's a conflict because mediation is supposed to be voluntary, but yet you have somebody saying you have to do mediation. And so is it worth anything? Well, the research has found that even when mediation is forced on parties, there is validity, because often parties are surprised because they do end up settling. To their surprise, it actually works. The second thing that happens is that they gain a better understanding of their case. So while everything you say in mediation can't be used in court, you still gain that knowledge that, there's another angle to this that I need to look at.
Yeah.
So they have found that even the mandatory mediation was of value.
So mediation is very important. It's half the time. You probably don't understand that it's a genie in a bottle.
That's right. That's right. And we want to take the genie out and not make it such a mystery.
Yes, so people can embrace it more. How do you as a mediator manage your expectations, especially if it's people that you never worked with and different circumstances? I mean, parties want to win, but in mediation, it's not about one party winning. How do you manage that expectation? Because there are people who don't know how to lose. There are people who it's their job to win at everything, and they tell you up front, I'm going to win. I'm taking it all. We're just wasting our time here. I've got better things to do. how do you try to manage those kinds of expectations?
I think, that as a mediator, I don't go and tell somebody, oh, you're never going to get this or you're going to lose. That's not my role as a mediator. And I can't decide anything. And I also can't advise on law. If there is a question of law, I'll refer the parties to their lawyers.
Yeah.
So there are certain boundaries there. But in order to manage expectations, you probe and you ask questions and you'll say, well, given the circumstances, do you really think that they're going to hand over $50 million to you? Or given the state of the company, do you think they can afford it? So it's by probing and asking questions of the parties that they themselves come to the realization that, maybe my position is unreasonable and maybe I need to, I need to be willing to compromise more. So that's one way of doing it, is just by asking more and more questions and having them come to the expectation, a realistic expectation, and not me telling them.
Lovely. For the benefit of my listeners and those who are watching, we're live, facebook.com/Nigeria Info. We're also live on YouTube, Nigeria Info FM. And if you're listening to us from outside of the country on our mobile app, join the conversation via Skype. All right, we'll be opening up the phone lines in a bit. But for those who are listening to us and watching, what are the different circumstances where mediation can be applied?
Right. So mediation can be applied in all circumstances, in all types of litigation, whether it's, mergers and acquisitions, if there's a dispute over price, over not meeting conditions of an acquisition. It could be over a contract, a breach of contract. It could be, artificial intelligence, an infringement of intellectual property. It could be labor issue, employer-employee. And then, of course, we know that we often use mediation in matrimonial cases. So mediation is open to all kinds of disputes. And it can also be used at any time, at any point of the dispute. So at the very beginning, when the parties find out that, they seem to be disputing something or they're in a disagreement, they can immediately go and talk to a mediator, or they could have started court proceedings already, and then they reach a certain point where they've seen evidence and they're ready to sit down and talk. So it could be at any stage of a litigation or of a dispute, and it's open to all kinds of subjects.
Lovely. Because people just keep listening and they're like, so what do we do with this mediation? So you're telling me that it's not a crime. For example, if I was already in court for a divorce, I can decide that, things are not panning out, the kids are being hurt or something. Maybe we can try mediation. So that can be suggested.
Absolutely. And, it's, but remember, both parties have to agree. So you may think it's a good idea, and, either yourself, if you're not represented, or your lawyer will put it forward to the other side and say, look, let's consider mediation for the benefit of all the parties. The children are hurting for whatever reason, or the company is suffering because, so much time taken up going to court. Let's attempt it without prejudice, confidential. Let's give it a try. Absolutely.
Well, I want Lagos to chime in. The conversation is still ongoing, but we're going to go on a quick break. We still have Franca Ciambella in the studio. She's a trained mediator, and she's here to talk to us about it and why it's very important in everything that we find ourselves doing. We'll go for a quick break. When we come back, the phone lines will be open. You could join the conversation. If you're watching us live on our live stream, post your comments on our live feed. We'd like to hear from you on WhatsApp, Skype. You can call us and be part of the conversation. My name is Mary Anacon. We'll be right back after these messages. 0201 465 7190. That's for the ladies. 0700 993 993 993. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook.com/Nigeria Info FM. We're talking mediation. Before I take the next call, Franca, what happens if there's an impasse? What happens if, nobody agrees on anything during mediation? Do you send them back to court? Do you send them back to the judge?
Right. Okay. So when you get to the point where there's an impasse and the parties can't seem to climb that hurdle or overcome the hurdle and they're close to reaching an agreement, but they just, aren't there.
Yeah.
And so, you talk about what are the alternatives. If you don't come to an agreement today, what's going to happen tomorrow? And usually it means that they're going to be back in court, that it's going to, be back to the time-consuming, process. It's going to be more expense. It's going to be more a continual hurt in the relationship. It's going to disrupt business. So you talk about what are the consequences if you don't reach an agreement. And usually, parties begin to think, okay, maybe an agreement that's not, perfect.
Put full stop for water wahala.
Ladies and gentlemen, Football Fan Festival in Nigeria is back. It's Goal Fest 2024, featuring exhilarating games, food, comedy, live music by some of the Nigerian musician superstars, and you can watch the UEFA Champions League final on a super huge screen. Goal Fest 2024 will take place on the 1st of June at the Balmoral Convention Center, Federal Palace Hotel, Amadabella Way, Victoria Island, Lagos. Time 12 noon. Limited tickets available. Get your tickets now at www.goalfestnigeria.com or at 267A at Timmy and Crescent, VI Lagos. Goal Fest 2024 is powered by Femi and the Gang and Football Republic. Proudly refreshed by Pepsi.
Mommy, my teacher said 90% of my brain will develop by the time I am 5.
Really? What else did she say?
She said I need iron in my food for my brain to grow well.
Oh, very true. And that's why I give you Cerelac Junior every day, which provides half of your daily iron needs.
And Cerelac Junior tastes so good.
Cerelac Junior with Iron Plus. It's all good, Mom.
It's like every other year, my wife wants to paint, and her own kind of budget just makes me want to faint. 50 buckets of paint? Make it make sense. I'm only dropping cheddar if it's using Santex.
Santex? Yes, Santex. The amazing durability is more than mere text. Rich quality paint within your budget. So make the smart choice. Paint with Santex. Can't go wrong. Can't go wrong with a smart choice. Santex paint. Santex paint. Smart choice.
Paint your dreams on the walls of your reality. Choose Santex paints for its rich quality, vibrant colors, and long-lasting coats. Available at authorized Santex paint distributors across Nigeria. Santex paint, the smart choice.
Madam, you don't try this new Lush Hair 4-in-1 no lie relaxer kit. We get free neutralizing shampoo and conditioner join.
What? Me, I know deal.
You not even sabi wetin dey happen for town. You see this lush hair relaxer so?
E no dey pepper, e no dey burn. E go even make your hair shine like oil.
Na so, lush hair relaxer kit na correct. We no go make your hair cut. We no go make your hair dry. E no dey pepper and e dey relax hair well well. Simply time. Come buy your own.
Lush hair, be beautiful.
Who says you can't have it all with one play?
I got that defined boy. You have just won yourself.
Congratulations.
Hello, good morning.
Yes, Melitus. One player, not one or two players because you won 20K.
So now you won yourself 20,000 naira. My name is Well Done. Okay, well done. We want to tell you, well done. You won yourself 20,000 naira.
With 500 naira, you can play to win big. From 120,000 naira to 190,000 naira daily on Nigeria Info. Go to oneplay.ng and play with 500 naira. And in a few seconds, your ticket is in the draw. Or dial *347 *880 *3#. Win daily on Nigeria Info. 50,000 naira on Morning Crossfire. 60,000 naira on WhatsApp Lagos. 20,000 naira on Sunnyside. And 60,000 naira on Game On. So Lagos, what are you waiting for? The more you play, the better your chances of winning. Remember to dial *347 *880 *3#. Play responsibly. Not suitable for persons under the age of 18.
Are you finding it difficult listening to your favorite talk radio Nigeria Info via the mobile app? Come closer. Let me fix that for you. Now launch the app on your device. Click the 3 lines on the top left corner of the app. Look for settings in the drop-down menu and click on it. Turn on the first option that you see. Make sure you turn on the option that says always use highest quality available audio. Now that you have done that, close the app and relaunch it. Voila! I did it! Oh, sorry, you did it. Now you can enjoy your radio anywhere, anytime. Nigeria Info. Let's talk.
In every part of the country, Wema Bank is there, serving the needs of every Nigerian. From the child whose dreams are as big as the sky, but in need of a head start. Young tech-driven innovators in search of a financial provider to support their novel ideas. The bold and confident boss lady in need of tailored financial services to fulfill her everyday business needs and maximize her potential. The elderly who want a stress-free day-to-day banking experience anytime, anywhere at their fingertips. The small and medium-scale entrepreneurs who need a partner to help transition from startup to scale-up. We are the backbone of every endeavor, creating value for all and fulfilling dreams for over 79 years. Wema Bank, the bank that works for everyone and stays with you all the way.
Omo, wait oh, no be polo be that. Eh? Na him now. Chey! Polo don step up oh! I hear say na Glow Cash Token rewards he use take step up. Yes so, you sef fit top up to step up in Glow Cash Token rewards that rewards you with an opportunity to win up to 100 million naira and many more amazing prizes. Recharge 1,000 naira weekly to qualify to win a Glow gift voucher or recharge 5,000 naira weekly to qualify for Samsung A05 smartphone or load 10,000 naira weekly to qualify for a Samsung A54 smartphone. The more you recharge, the more your chances of winning up to 100 million naira in the weekly national consumer draw. To start winning, dial *301# now. Terms and conditions apply.
Unlimited.
As a mom and a dentist, I know the importance of strong teeth, beautiful white smile, and fresh breath. They give you the confidence to eat the right foods without worry. Speak confidently in public, and making friends is easier when you know you have fresh breath. I give my family confidence with Pepsodent's Triple Protection 1, 2, 3. It's 3 toothpaste in 1 to protect their teeth from holes, give them white teeth, and fresh breath. The confidence of 3 toothpaste in 1. Pepsodent's Triple Protection 1, 2, 3.
In Nigeria, the weather can change in an instant, just like life itself. Even when you are caught in a heavy downpour or harmattan has left your skin dry, there's one thing that never changes. the restoring power of Vaseline Petroleum Jelly. Because we all know when Hamilton strikes, if you are not protecting your skin, it cracks. So do your lips, and no one wants that. So, use Vaseline Petroleum Jelly to keep your skin healthy, smooth, moisturized, and protected all day long. So you can embrace every season with confidence.
Enjoy the delicious creamy goodness of cowbell. Cowbell contains Vitarich and vitamin B9, which supports brain development. Use cowbell in your tea, cereal, pap, and other meals of choice. Cowbell, so creamy, so good.
Say goodbye to charging fears with Infinix Note 40 fast charging, ensuring you're powered up from boardrooms to hangouts. Enjoy the stunning 108 megapixel iOS zoom camera and capture memorable moments every day. There's more. Purchase the Infinix Note 40 and get a 3 months free subscription to Showmax to enjoy all the action of the English Premier League football matches and the latest blockbuster movies.
What are you waiting for? Head over to any authorized Infinix retail store nationwide and get your Infinix Note 40 today. Terms and conditions apply.
Conversation.
Is it a problem when you can't stop yourself from checking the social media?
So let me drop it for a day. And discover that you can actually drop it, no problem.
Yes.
Then you're not addicted. You just have this bad habit of always pressing your phone.
Do you know, even though I'm hungry, I'm begging people to please give me something I want to eat. Immediately they give me the money. I will just find myself playing this game. I want to win for 3,000 with 200.
Stay with 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.
This is Hard Facts.
All right, we're back. We're still talking mediation, and I was having a little side talk with Franca. And oh gosh, you know how to do big boom. Ask your husband what big boom is; he will tell you. Anyway, we're still talking mediation, and all that you need to know about mediation. If you have questions, you have comments. If you're going through a divorce, or you have problems in the office, or your company is having to go to court about something, and maybe you think that mediation can be a solution because of all the things that we've talked about today. Mediation, we hear, is cheaper. It's easier to deal with because litigations can go for years. I've seen people who've been in court for 25 years on an issue, and then you wonder, where do they have the money to pay for this? If you have questions, you have comments, you want to ask my guest questions, feel free to join the conversation. It's 0700 993 993 993. That's 0700 993 993 993. You could also join the conversation on WhatsApp 080 959 75805, or you could tweet.
Welcome back to your number.
Or you can tweet at Nigeria Info on Twitter. We are Nigeria Info 99.3. Hello, welcome to Glass Ceiling. Please turn off your radio.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for this program you brought it. Mr. Madi calling from Idumu.
Mr. Madi, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I want to ask your guest. Honestly, I don't know what you have been saying, or especially my own case is between employer and employee. And how can we get in touch? How can we get in contact with them to explain? Because this is a situation I would have loved them to come in because of issues I've been doing that since last year. Because I don't have the money to go for any litigation. Because I think mediation with this aspect will have been of good help to me. If I can have the, how will I contact them, and how does it look at that aspect?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Great, Mr. Madi. Just listen to the radio. So, Franca is going to tell you how you can contact her on social media, via email. Let her know, because we don't want you to tell us what it is on the radio because it's a private issue. Just as he said,
yes,
it's difficult to go into litigation if you don't have the money to do so.
That's it. And that's one of the good things about mediation is that it's less costly. It takes less time. It's most of them are over and done with in a day. And, employer-employee matters are often resolved in mediation. And if you would like to send me an email and ask me questions, please go to my website, Raffles Mediation Chambers Ltd, and you'll have all the information there about how to email me, and I would be happy to point you in the right direction.
Can you spell Raffles?
Sure. It's Raffles, Raffles Mediation Chambers Ltd. And you'll have all the my email, all the information that you'll need to contact me, and I'd be happy to try and point you in the right direction.
Have you had, in the course of mediation, to deal with children or parties that are in mediation? Is it allowed to have conversations including children, especially when it comes to custody battles?
Right. Mediation is really between the parties involved. So you would not bring other parties like children or mother-in-laws or anybody else into the mediation room.
Why?
So it's really between the two parties involved, because it's not a court procedure. We're not there to gather evidence. We're not there to, plead a case or to sway a judge. It's really between the parties. And often third parties will interfere with the process. So it's something that we try to do the parties involved. Sometimes they need somebody there for more support. They can ask permission that certain people be present, but they won't be speaking. So it's very unlike a court procedure where you get witnesses and you bring evidence forward and you ask for information. No, this is between the parties involved.
So it's so you can actually take the gloves off and say it as it is, no holds barred.
Absolutely, because it's all without prejudice. What you say in the mediation can't be used in a court procedure, and simply it's confidential. The parties agree when they sign on to the mediation that all the proceedings will be confidential. So you have that, security, knowing that you can speak freely, you can say what's really, in your heart or what's really bothering you.
And it won't be used against you.
No.
So it's a safe space. It's more like going to see my shrink.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, Ariane.
I'm saying it's confidential, so the other person can't use it against me.
No, it is confidential, right.
Lovely. Well, during the conversation, we have very little time. I have just 8 minutes on the clock. I want to take all your questions, your comments, and yes, people are still asking how to reach you. Don't worry, she's going to tell us before we leave the studio again her website and how you can email her and how you can talk to her after the conversation. Hello, welcome to Hard Facts.
Good afternoon, Miriam.
Good evening.
Or evening.
Yeah.
We have Emmanuel on the line.
Emmanuel, go ahead.
Pardon me for this, my question. Some of these big complaints that stand in the middle, in terms of tax for government, like Alphabet, are they mediators? That is one. Secondly, in the mediating industry, for instance, a huge money, is let's say it's a case that involves money, and then they will want to settle us, of course, like EFCC against somebody. Will they settle the mediating organization, from the money as in how much the money is, or they have their own personal fees, that they charge the both sides? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for calling. Is mediation free?
Right. There is some mediation available with the court system, and there is some community mediation. So I think, everyone is free to explore that. The mediation that I do is what we call a private mediation. And so then that means that I'm appointed as a mediator and we discuss the fees, the costs ahead of time. So there are no surprises. And, we also discuss the time allocation. Sometimes when you do public mediations, the time is limited. A mediator will only have 2 hours and will have to adjourn, et cetera, et cetera. And but the mediations that I do are private mediations, and we can establish timelines and how much time it's going to take.
Yeah.
And will take as much time as it needs. So whatever mediator you appoint, you should discuss the fees, and normally the parties share in the fees equally. Not always, but normally that's the case. But it should be something discussed ahead of time and agreed ahead of time.
Yeah, his first question does not apply to our type of mediation because that they're not mediators. They're just a conduit. Emmanuel, that's the answer to that first question. He was asking something totally outside of your your purview of mediation. I want to take a few more thoughts and comments. More people are asking, can we just quickly put out the website again so that people, because everyone's asking, how can we get her website? We need to be able to talk to her. So
Absolutely. It's rafflesmediation.com.
rafflesmediation.com. RAFFLES.
Mediation.
Mediation. MEDIATION.com.
Perfect. Yes.
Okay. So rafflesmediation.com. When you go on the website, you can get all the information, how to email her, how to send her messages, and ask all your questions. Okay, she will answer you. And I know that everybody doesn't want to come on air to wash the dirty linen, so people are keeping quiet and asking for the websites. More and more messages saying, what's the website? What's the website? Well, we've given it to you. We'll give it to you again before we leave the studio. Okay, rafflesmediation.com.
Perfect.
Yes. And of course, I'm sure that when you get on the website, you follow the prompts and do as you are told. Is mediation expensive? Because expensive is relative. It's just like saying, it's just like having lawyering up. You can get an average lawyer, you can get a very expensive lawyer. For mediation, is it the same?
I think the mediation costs, the structure varies. And it really depends on the case and the parties. So it could be a structure that's on an hourly basis. It could be a structure that's on a daily basis. It could be a structure that's, a little bit of both. Time, the amount of time spent, plus, a success, a success component. So that's really for the mediator. And then if the parties have their own lawyers, then it's the amount of time that the lawyers spend on the mediation. So it's typically, submitting some of the background papers to the mediator, attending the pre-mediation session, and then attending the mediation, which is usually done in a day's time.
In this part, we have a lot of landlord-tenant issues that half the time should be mediated as opposed to going to court. Even though there's always that option of going to court, but most people would rather go into mediation because, like you said, it costs less. How easy is that kind of mediation, especially if there's the landlord is saying you have to leave my house, you need to quit, but then the person is saying, well, under the law I still have some how do you mediate between those two?
Well, as I said earlier, mediation is voluntary and both parties have to agree to go to mediation. In landlord-tenant disputes, there's a lot of community mediation available for those types of disputes, and that should be really the first place you go to. Google mediation, community mediation for landlord-tenant disputes, and see what's available in the community itself. But at the end of the day, one of the parties may say, no, I don't want to mediate, probably thinking that they have a very strong position, that it's slam dunk if they go to court, right? So they there's no incentive for them to mediate. So it can be difficult.
Oof. I'm trying to imagine the situation, but I want to thank you all for being part of the conversation. Franca is going to drop her website again because all of you keep sending messages. What is the website? She's going to put it out again. I think I've said it twice. Let's try again before we let Franca go because I have just one more minute on the clock. Franca.
The website is rafflesmediation.com. Altogether. So Raffles, RAFFLES, mediation, MEDIATION.com.
Okay.
And that has all the information in terms of LinkedIn, in terms of Instagram, in terms of how to email me directly. And I will try to help you to the best that I can.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you to my guest, Franca. Has been here before, and she came back today again because we needed to have this conversation. Franca is the principal senior mediator at Raffles Mediation Chambers Limited, and she has been acting as a mediator for over 20 years. 20 years under your belt.
Yes.
That's a very good one. So, I mean, a hefty CV, if you ask me. Franca Ciambella, thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate it, and I've learned a lot about mediation.
Thank you, Marianne. It's always a pleasure.
Same
Thank you
here.
so much.
Same here. All right, Lagos. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, on the other side, calling on all POS operators across Lagos, and even if you're listening from outside of Lagos and you own a POS business, we're going to be talking about you on the other side of the clock and what the CAC has ordered that you go register. How easy has that process been? Have you registered? Will you register? We'll talk about it on the other side of the clock on Balogun and Broad.